Sign it now or leave before dessert, my future mother-in-law, Lillian Vale said, sliding the prenuptial agreement across the rehearsal dinner table, while the wedding planner kept her eyes on the flowers, and the family attorney kept one hand, resting on his pen like my humiliation had already been placed on the schedule. No one looked shocked. No one told her to stop. That was the first thing I understood. This was not a sudden insult. It was a room they had built for me. We were in the private dining room of the Vale estate the night before the wedding, with candles burning low in silver holders and crystal plates, still carrying slices of pear, smoked salmon, and little rounds of goat cheese. No one was eating anymore. I was wearing a pale silk dress from my rehearsal wardrobe. My fiance Ethan Vale sat 3 seats down from me with his jacket off and his cufflinks on the table, looking tired in that polished way men like him always do when they want their silence to pass for decency. On my left sat Audrey, his sister, with a glass of white wine and a smile that had never once reached her eyes. On my right sat the wedding planner, the family attorney, the notary, and 2 churchwomen Lillian liked to keep nearby whenever she wanted cruelty to feel respectable. Lillian rested 2 fingers on the signature page. A woman entering this family should not be frightened by clarity, she said. If you are here for the right reasons, Naomi, then you sign, and tomorrow stays beautiful. Audrey took a small sip of wine and smiled at the tablecloth. Any decent woman would have signed it already, she said. I looked at Ethan. He gave me the same expression he had been giving me for weeks whenever his mother said something sharp enough to draw blood. Soft mouth, tired eyes, controlled disappointment. The expression that said I could either swallow what had just happened or become the problem. Do not turn this into something ugly, he said quietly. It is just paperwork. Just paperwork. That would have been funny if the family sitting around me had not already spent the last 2 weeks trying to wrap their hands around money that did not belong to them. My name is Naomi Pierce. I was 31 years old and I worked in financial compliance review for a consulting firm in Baltimore. My entire job was reading documents written by people who wanted extraction to sound like structure, or risk to sound like opportunity, or theft to sound like planning. So when I opened the prenup and reached page 4, I did not see clarity. I saw an intake valve. The first clause that caught my eye treated any post-marriage cash distributions from inherited structures as a marital support benefit once they were received. The second required that those distributions be deposited into a shared household operating account unless otherwise agreed in writing by both spouses. The third gave Ethan a fixed participatory share in all recurring cash distributions received during the marriage. The fourth said I waived reimbursement tracing and separate recovery claims over any distributed funds used to support marital obligations. By page 7, I found the writer. Administrative contact review. Post-marital routing verification. Distribution contact reference. Trustee information to be confirmed upon execution. I read that page twice. Then I looked up and understood the room for what it really was. Not a rehearsal dinner. A cash flow meeting in candlelight. My grandmother Eleanor Pierce had left me a private trust 3 years earlier. She had spent her adult life buying assets no one glamorous ever noticed. Medical office leases, bond ladders, a small block of dividend holdings, the kind of steady, boring structure that made money without needing applause. The trust paid me every quarter. It did not make me some society princess. It just made my life safe. Rent safe, future safe, choice safe. More important, it was built to stay that way. Private trustee. Independent counsel. Distribution controls. Protective language that made sure no husband, no in-law, and no smiling family with old silver and temporary liquidity could slide their hands into it just because I happened to love one of their sons. Until Ethan proposed, almost no one outside my attorney, my accountant, and Margaret Sloan, my trustee, knew much about its structure. Then, suddenly, Lillian became curious. Over lunch, she would ask if distributions came on a fixed calendar. At dinner, Ethan would ask whether I planned to keep my old banking arrangements after marriage, or whether it might be simpler to align household inflows. Audrey once laughed over cocktails and said that separate accounts felt awfully defensive for someone planning forever. Simpler, align, household inflows, defensive. That is the language people use when they want access, without having to say the word access. 3 days before the rehearsal dinner, an assistant from Halston Private Trust called to let me know. Someone from the Vale family office had asked whether post-marriage changes ever affected distribution, routing, or beneficiary contact. Protocols. I had never authorized that inquiry. I made a note of it. I said nothing. Then this document arrived in front of me at a candlelit table the night before my wedding. I closed the prenup halfway and looked at Lillian. Of course I will review it carefully, I said. Once disclosure is reciprocal. For the first time since dessert plates had hit the table, the room shifted. Lillian did not like being answered without fear. Reciprocal, she repeated. Yes, I said. If your agreement reaches into inherited distributions, household solvency, and future cash flow treatment, then I will need full disclosure of family debt exposure, short-term obligations, contingent lending representations, and any communications with outside advisors that referenced my trust, my future, distributions or anticipated post-marriage access to them. One of the church women actually stopped chewing. Audrey let out a little laugh. That is exactly what Ethan meant, she said. You make everything sound like a federal hearing. Ethan leaned forward. Naomi, please. We are trying to avoid drama. No, I said. You are trying to avoid disclosure. Lillian held my gaze for a long moment. She had the kind of face that always looked expensive, even when it was cold. Then she smiled. Very well, she said. If responsible review makes you feel secure, then we will do this properly. Properly. That word landed over the table like perfume poured over rot. I nodded and slid the agreement back toward her. Good, I said. Then let us do it properly. That should have felt like a small win. It did not. It felt like the sound a lock makes when it turns on the wrong side of the door. When dinner broke, Audrey passed me in the hallway and brushed my arm just hard enough to be insulting. You are working very hard to sound important tonight, she murmured. I smiled at her. No, I said. I am working very hard to sound expensive. She hated that. Good. Upstairs, my room had already been moved. My rehearsal flowers were gone. My garment bags were gone. Even the pair of shoes I had left by the chaise were gone. A maid I had never seen before told me Mrs. Vale wanted me settled into the blue guest room for the night because the bridal suite needed to be prepared for morning photographs. Prepared. That is another word families like that use when they want to tell you that your place has become conditional. I let them move me. That is the part people never understand about this kind of story. You do not win by resisting every insult the moment it lands. Sometimes you win by taking exactly the step backward your enemy wants, so she never feels how close she is to the edge. Ethan came to the blue room a little after 10. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it with that same tired expression like he was the one carrying too much. You embarrassed my mother, he said. No, I said. Your mother embarrassed herself. He exhaled through his nose. She is trying to protect the family. That almost made me laugh. From what I said. My paperwork. From uncertainty, he said. From the appearance of disorganization around a public marriage. From avoidable tension about money. Money. There it was. Not love. Not marriage. Not trust. Money. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him. If this were really about order, your family office would not be asking my trust office about distribution routing. His face changed. Only slightly. But men like Ethan were never as unreadable as they thought. That was a routine inquiry, he said. No, I said. A routine inquiry does not end up mirrored inside a prenup rider that gives you a cut of every quarterly distribution I receive. He pushed away from the door. After marriage, those distributions affect both of us, he said. That is not greed. That is reality. I stared at him. There was always a moment in every file I reviewed when the person on the other side stopped pretending they were building structure and admitted they were hunting cash. Not in so many words. Just in the logic they chose when the masking tape peeled off. I heard it then. How short are you, Ethan? I asked. He went still. I said it again. How much are you missing? You do not know what you are talking about, he said. Then tell me why your mother is drafting household participation off my inherited distributions, I said, and tell me why your writer needs my trustee information before the ceremony. He said nothing. That silence was the end of him. Not as a fiance. He had already been dying for the last half hour. As a possibility. As a man I still needed to protect from what I knew how to do. He left without fixing a single thing. The moment the door shut, I called Diana Mercer. Diana had served as outside counsel for my grandmother trust for more than a decade. She was in her 60s, exact, unsentimental, and professionally immune to expensive people with good posture. I gave her the facts in order. Forced prenup at the rehearsal dinner. Distribution participation clause. Routing rider asking for trustee information. Prior contact attempt to Halston. Ethan freezing when I asked about shortfalls. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not sign anything else tonight. I will call you back." I sat awake in the blue guest room with my hair half pinned, and my wedding itinerary still glowing on the screen of my phone, and I watched the house settle around me. Down the hall, someone laughed. Somewhere outside on the lawn, the tent crew kept working under portable lights. The entire property was still moving toward a ceremony they believed was already too close for me to stop. That was their mistake. Diana called back just after midnight. "It is worse than greed," she said. "It is timing." I stood and went to the window. "Tell me." "Vale Hospitality is carrying a short-term liquidity hole," she said. "A property expansion went long. Their bridge arrangements are under pressure. Their advisor has been presenting a stabilized post-marriage household support picture to soothe concerns. Your recurring distributions were being treated as expected support inside that future picture." My throat went cold. "Me," I said. "Not you as a person," Diana said. "You as quarterly cash flow. There are sentences that split a life in half. That was one of mine," she continued. Someone connected to the Vale side also tried to ask whether beneficiary routing could be updated after marriage through administrative review. Halston flagged it and held the file. No change was made. But the attempt is there. So they do not need the principal, I said. No, she said. They do not need the whole orchard. They just want the fruit delivered to their kitchen every quarter. I closed my eyes. The room was dark, except for the window and the screen of my phone. What do I need? I asked. Make them sign clean statements, Diana said. Reciprocal disclosure. Non-reliance. Certification that no lender, advisor, or family office has relied on your trust for post-marriage household support. Certification that no one has directed, attempted to direct, or discussed rerouting distributions without your verified consent. Keep your tone warm, cooperative. Let them believe you are trying to save the wedding. If I accuse them now, they pull back, I said. Exactly, she said. If you sound like a responsible bride, they keep smiling while they sign their own collapse. So that is what I did. Before 1 a.m, I had sent a gracious email. I wrote that I wanted everyone to feel secure before the ceremony. I wrote that I understood how emotional weddings could make people. I wrote that to avoid misunderstandings, I would be comfortable executing the revised prenup once a mutual financial disclosure addendum and a non-reliance certification were signed by all relevant parties. I attached drafts Diana had cleaned into polite weaponry. A reciprocal disclosure statement, a household support non-reliance certification, a routing and contact integrity acknowledgement, warm language, clean signatures, a bride trying to be sensible. Lillian replied just after 8 a.m. Reasonable. We can finish everything in the library at 10. Reasonable. People like her always believed the ugliest things they did could be washed clean if the stationery was nice enough. The punishment started before breakfast. My stylist was redirected. The planner informed me that family photographs had been moved up and I would not be included until later because there had been concerns about my stress level. Audrey made sure 2 bridesmaids heard that I had become fixated on money and needed to be handled carefully until the ceremony. Someone sent breakfast to my room on a tray as if I were too fragile to come downstairs. Overwhelmed, the planner called me. That was Lillian's favorite word for women she was trying to shrink. I let them shrink me. I let them move me. I let them speak around me like I was already half erased by the wedding timetable. By 10, I walked into the library in a silk robe with my hair half done, no jewelry except the engagement ring and the exact face a woman wears when everyone in the room thinks she is too cornered to fight. Every seat was full. Lillian, Audrey, Ethan, the family attorney, the notary, their wealth advisor, and the same 2 church women from dinner now sitting near the window like moral furniture. Lillian looked up and smiled with almost maternal warmth. I am glad we are being sensible, she said. That nearly made me admire her. The nerve it takes to sound tender while sitting on a lever you intend to pull. I sat, opened the folder, reviewed the signature pages, and let the room watch me breathe. Then I slid the reciprocal disclosure addendum across to Lillian. Please make sure your signatures remain attached to the final set, I said. If we are closing this properly, I want the non-reliance language and the routing acknowledgement to stay exactly where they are. Of course, dear, she said. Dear. A word like that can rot in a room for years. They signed, one by one. Lillian first, then the attorney, then the advisor, then Ethan. That last one almost impressed me. Men like him always think their signature can still rescue whatever their behavior has already ruined. I watched the pages come back across the table and knew I had what I needed. By noon, the library was cleared. The planner was rushing. The florist was panicking about timing. Someone was steaming my gown. Someone else was looking for missing pearl pins. The house was vibrating with the kind of money that believes it can still bully time into obedience. I was dressed at 1:40, standing in the small prep room beside the ceremony lawn with my bouquet in my hands and the officiant already in place outside. Guests were seated. Music was beginning. The tent walls moved softly in the wind. Audrey was adjusting something on her own dress when Ethan stepped inside. The planner turned away to speak to a groomsman. For one brief moment, we were almost alone. He came close enough that no one else would hear him clearly. Just tell me the name of your trustee before the vows, he said quietly. Then this all goes smoothly. There it was. The real ask. Not sign. Not trust me. Not marry me. The last blank line in the writer. The final key for the routing materials they had been trying to clean up since dinner. He did not need my love. He did not even need my yes. He needed the name at the gate. I looked at him, and in that one small moment before the ceremony understood something so clean it felt like relief. They did not need a wife. They needed a distribution stream in a wedding dress. I handed my bouquet to the nearest bridesmaid. Then I took out my phone. What are you doing? Ethan said. Giving you the clean answer you wanted, I said. I hit speaker and called the Halston compliance line Diana had told me to use if anything escalated in a live setting. It rang once. Then a calm female voice answered. Compliance, this is Rachel Danner. This is Naomi Pierce, I said, speaking clearly enough for the planner, the bridesmaid, Audrey, Ethan, and by now Lillian, at the doorway to hear. I need to verify whether any third party has attempted to alter administrative contact information, trustee reference information, or distribution routing concerning my trust in connection with a marriage-related documentation request. The room went still. Ethan reached toward my wrist. "Do not do this," he said under his breath. I stepped back. Rachel Danner spoke again, her voice flat and careful in the way only compliance officers and morticians ever truly master. "For your protection, I can confirm that your file has been flagged for review based on attempted third-party contact involving distribution administration and post-marriage routing representations. No changes were processed. No administrative contact updates were honored. Additional requests were held pending direct beneficiary verification." Across from me, Audrey lost all color. Lillian took one sharp step into the room. "That is private," she said. Rachel continued as if no one else existed. "Your trustee has also been notified that marriage-related coercive timing appears to be involved in the attempted contact pattern. Administrative handling is frozen, pending written confirmation from you and counsel." I let that sit in the air. Then I opened the prenup to the marked page and looked directly at Ethan. "This agreement says every cash distribution I receive after marriage becomes a marital support benefit," I said. "It says those funds move into a household operating account. It says you receive a fixed share. It says I give up reimbursement rights." The planner turned around slowly. The bridesmaid holding my bouquet looked like she wished she could disappear into the wallpaper. I kept reading. "And this rider, the one asking for trustee information, exists to support post-marriage routing review of those same distributions." Lillian's voice sharpened. "Enough," she said. "No," I said. "Enough was yesterday when you tried to package quarterly extraction as family values." The officiant had stepped inside by then, not fully understanding what he was seeing, but understanding enough to know the ceremony had already gone off script. Ethan held his palms out like that might make him look reasonable. "Naomi, you are making this sound uglier than it is." I looked at him. "Then tell them I am wrong," I said. He said nothing. That was the second silence that ended him. I turned the phone slightly, so the voice on speaker carried toward the room. "Ms. Danner," I said, "did Halston receive inquiries or materials attempting to connect marital status changes with future distribution handling on my account?" "Yes," she said. "Materials and inquiry language consistent with that objective were received and held." Objective. That word did more damage than shouting ever could. I closed the folder. "You were not marrying me," I said to Ethan. "You were marrying my quarterly deposits." Lillian came fully into the room, then pearl earrings trembling with the force of her anger. "You ungrateful little opportunist," she hissed. "We opened this family to you." "No," I said. "You opened my trust and called it hospitality." Audrey finally found her voice. "That is ridiculous," she said. "No one was taking anything." I turned the prenup toward her and tapped the page. "This clause gives your brother a cut every time my trust pays me," I said. "Not once. Not in an emergency. Every time. That is not marriage. That is a subscription model." Even then, Lillian tried to save the performance. "It is a shared life provision," she said. "It is how responsible families plan." I smiled at her. "Then why did you sign the non-reliance certification this morning?" I said, the one stating. "Neither your family, your attorney, nor your advisor had relied on my trust or future distributions in any household support picture or lender." Conversation. The wealth advisor in the doorway actually looked away. Ethan's face changed, then not into shame, because that would have required character, but into fear. Real fear. "You set this up," he said. I shook my head. "No," I said. "You did. I just read what you wrote and then I asked you to sign it twice." There is a kind of silence that arrives when a room full of rich people realizes the paperwork no longer belongs to them. It settled over us then. The planner lowered her clipboard. One of the churchwomen put a hand over her chest. The officiant stepped back toward the door. Audrey looked from Ethan to Lillian like she was waiting for one of them to explain how this had become possible. No one could. Because the explanation was ugly and simple. They had mistaken schedule for power. They thought if they got me close enough to the vows I would sign anything to avoid public disgrace. They were wrong. I took off my engagement ring. I set it on the unsigned prenup. "Keep your ceremony," I said. "I am keeping the money you tried to turn into payroll." Ethan took one step toward me. "Please," he said. "Let us talk privately." "No," I said. Lillian straightened her spine and looked at me with naked hatred, now all performance gone. "You have damaged this family," she said. I held her gaze. "No," I said. "I interrupted your plan." That was when Rachel Danner spoke one last time from the phone. "Ms. Pierce, would you like notation added that attempted administrative access appears to have occurred under active marriage-related pressure?" I did not look away from Lillian. "Yes," I said. "Add it." "Understood," Rachel said. 2 syllables. That was all. But in rooms like that, 2 syllables can cost more than most apologies ever buy back. I ended the call, took my bouquet from the stunned bridesmaid, then handed it right back. I will not be needing this, I said. No one stopped me when I walked out. That is the part I remember most. Not the ring on the paper. Not Audrey's face. Not even Ethan standing there in formal wear, finally looking exactly like what he was, a man who had dressed himself as a future and gotten caught reaching for a revenue stream. What I remember is that no one stopped me. Because truth, once it is loud enough, makes cowards very still. Officially, the wedding was postponed due to private family concerns. Unofficially, by sundown, every florist, caterer, driver, planner, makeup artist, and church volunteer within 40 miles knew the Vales had tried to marry a trust distribution before they married a bride. In families like theirs, that is worse than scandal. It is embarrassment with witnesses. I went home that afternoon, not to the hotel booked for the honeymoon, not to a friend's apartment, home. The narrow brick house my grandmother bought before I was born, with the creaky back steps and the kitchen window that sticks in damp weather, and the one stupid hallway light that has always flickered if you hit the switch too softly. Margaret Sloane called before dark. Protective review is active, she said. No one from the Vale side will be permitted anywhere near administrative handling again. The file is tighter now than it was yesterday. They had tried to loosen it. Instead, they had locked themselves out forever. Ethan texted just after 8. Please let me explain. I deleted it. Lillian emailed once. You have destroyed this family beyond repair. That one I kept. Not because it hurt. Because it told the truth more cleanly than anything she said before or after. I had damaged the family they were trying to be. The one that smiled in public and fed itself in private on anyone softer, poorer, or more polite than they were. Over the next month, Vale Hospitality quietly sold off a parcel they had once boasted they would hold forever. Their bridge review tightened. Their advisors stopped returning. Society calls for a while. Audrey posted 2 photographs about grace and resilience before someone with better instincts finally told her to stop. Ethan disappeared from the pages of the local magazines that liked to photograph men like him at charity events near expensive hedges. Lillian sent one last message through a mutual friend, saying that in time I would regret choosing pride over belonging. I never answered. Because pride was never the issue. Belonging was. She wanted me to belong to their shortfall, their image, their pressure, their need. I did not. That was the whole point. People think stories like mine are about revenge. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they are just about refusing conversion. Refusing to let your life become fuel for a machine that was built before you arrived and would have kept eating long after you were gone. The night before the wedding, Lillian thought she was testing whether I loved Ethan enough to sign. What she never understood was that I had already seen the truth. They were the ones trying to live on me. And when I put the ring on that unsigned prenup and walked away from the vows, I did not feel abandoned, hysterical, or ruined. I felt exact. That was enough.